Executive Director of Partnership for Africa, Social and Governance Research, PASGR, Kenya. PASGR is an independent, non-partisan, pan-Africa, not-for-profit organization established in 2011 and located in Nairobi, Kenya. PASGR runs a collaborative Master of Research and Public Policy (MRPP) program in 30 universities in 7 countries, a research program with activities for projects in 16 countries, and a professional development training program with participants from 25 African countries. Formerly, he was Program Director of Higher Education and Libraries in Africa for Carnegie Corporation in New York from 2008 to 2014. He studied sociology at the University of Lagos and the London School of Economics and obtained his PhD from the University of Sussex, UK. Dr. Aina was appointed full professor in the Department of Sociology at the University of Lagos in 1993. He served as the Deputy Executive Secretary of the Dakar, Senegal-based Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa, PASGR, from 1993 to 1998. From 1998 to 2008, he worked in the Nairobi office of the Ford Foundation and spent a short period as the acting regional representative of the Ford Foundation office for Middle East and North Africa in Cairo. He was regional representative for the Ford Foundation office for Eastern Africa between 2003 and 2008. He is or has been a board member of Trust Africa, Dakar, Senegal, Africa Population Health Research Center in Nairobi, Winrock International, USA, Sydney Labs, USA, the Kenya Human Rights Commission, and the King Bowden Foundation, USA. He served as a member of the Council of the United States International University, Nairobi, Kenya. He is an author, co-author, editor, co-editor of 11 books and monographs, and co-edited with Benkikosi Moyo the volumes Giving to Help, Helping to Give, the Context and Politics of Africa Philanthropy, 2013. I have the pleasure in inviting Professor Tade Akin Aina to present his lecture.
The Vice Chancellor, Professor Idowu Olayinka, Deputy Vice Chancellors, the Registrar, Ms. Olubunmi Faloyi, the Provost College of Postgraduate Studies, Professor Oyebamiji Babalola, deans here present, distinguished members of faculty, visiting colleagues from other Nigerian and African universities present, students, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. May I begin this lecture by offering my sincere appreciation to the Vice Chancellor and the leadership of the University of Ibadan, the Provost and management of the Postgraduate College for inviting me to contribute to the occasion of the interdisciplinary discourse of the College of Postgraduate Studies of the University. I am indeed honored to be part of that distinguished pool of scholars that I've had the opportunity to engage and share with you and the world their research, their thoughts and reflections on key issues of development since the series started in 1990. The founders of this series are worthy of commendation for their foresight, their imagination and recognition of the importance of conversations and dialogues across disciplines and paradigms in a world where both intellectual and practical problems are increasingly becoming systemic and holistic, and therefore transcending national, disciplinary, and epistemological boundaries and borders. It is my hope that my lecture today, and Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, forgive me for changing the topic. I have a reason. What is a good lecture on discourse if it is not polemical? I had to resort to a polemical engagement because of the increasing devaluation of the social sciences by political leaders and public leaders in Africa today. And coming from the Partnership for African Social and Governance Research, I took the bait. So instead of the original title, my lecture will be The Social Sciences and Public Policy in Nigeria in the Era of the Fourth Industrial Revolution: Relevance and Potential for Social Transformation. I hope it will fulfill the task of transcending boundaries and crossing borders, but also provide critical insights for thought and action as we reflect on and engage another imminent great transformation. To borrow the title of that great economic anthropologist, Karl Polanyi, who, when he wrote about the first industrial revolution, he called it the Great Transformation. It is also my hope that as we jointly explore the contours of our learning, knowledge systems, and their implications for public policy and social transformation, some of the current interventions of our institution, the Partnership for African and Social Governance Research, in innovations in pedagogy, PEDAL, research uptake and policy engagement, Utafiti Sera, policy research, and our commitment to excellence in the social sciences for public policy will be situated more clearly in the larger intellectual and practical context in which we see ourselves and our university partners. And I'm saying this because in the past 2 days, people have asked me, PEDAL pedagogy, what is the African basis, philosophy, and epistemology of PEDAL? And I said to them, it is firmly rooted in African traditions of socialization, peer education, and group learning, and learning by doing. So basically, some of the things that we do in PASGR now, I want to be able to contextualize them and situate them, not only in the nature of the social sciences, but also in the debate about the relevance of the social sciences. We live today in unprecedented times in terms of the capacity and scale of change and transformation in science, in technology, in communications, in culture, in politics, human mobility, and migration. We are daily witnesses to inventions and innovations which a century ago will be considered either as magic or witchcraft. It reminds me of Malinowski's great book, Science, Magic, and Witchcraft, in which Malinowski posited that all these are forms of knowledge, but they are only different in certain ways. I can imagine my grandmother today being on a WhatsApp conversation with her granddaughter, my daughter, and the picture of my daughter is showing, and my daughter is 7,000 miles away, and my grandmother is in my father's village. I'm sure my grandmother will have thought this was magic or this was witchcraft. So these are the times in which we live in. And yet there are the times in which we face new polarities and contradictions, embodied in our endlessly evolving complex systems, such as we have not seen before. These are further underlined by the knowledge that humankind has never before witnessed the same level of concentration of wealth in a few hands, along with the size and prevalence of poverty across the world as we see it today. This is the era of Bill Gates, the era of Warren Buffett, the era of Jeff Bezos, the era of Zuckerberg, the era in which 5% of the world own about 85% of its wealth, and in which several of our people today, you can still see them languishing in poverty. The world has never seen that kind of inequality. The world has never seen that kind of concentration of wealth. Piketty, in the famous book on capital, and Stiglitz all have made this kind of observation. But the world is made more, this disparity and inequality is made more spectacular because of the nature of the world in which we live today. We live in the world of 24 hours news media, and we live in the world of reality television, in which the poor can see how well and how stupendous and spectacular the wealth of the rich is. Today, peoples, ideas, technologies, goods, viruses, and diseases transcend borders and cross boundaries at a scale and pace that disrupts systems, values, and institutions, unsettle old ways of working and living, while at the same time creating new opportunities and challenges. It's a world in which we are being increasingly asked to have visas, to have all kinds of legal passages, but the viruses and the diseases need no visa to cross the borders and boundaries of our different nations. Scholars across the world have recognized and tried to understand the changing world as far back as the mid to late 20th century and the early parts of this century, when there were studies and reflections on social and economic phenomena characterized, particularly among sociologists and political scientists, as the post-industrial society, the era of post-Fordism, and of course, the era of post-modernity. In the discipline of development studies, scholars have focused on political economies and societies of the global south from the perspectives of globalization and neoliberalization. Given the economic reforms and structural adjustment policies driven by global institutions, those of us in Africa have in particularly been acutely aware of the policy elements and policy implications of globalization for the economy, popular culture, human rights, knowledge systems, higher education, and universities in particular. Globalization was neither neutral nor innocent and had both positive and negative effects on African and Nigerian higher education. The more negative effects coming through the direct impact of structural adjustment programs on higher education funding and investment, and the concomitant effects on quality, academic staff recruitment and retention, access, equity, productivity, and internationalization. Indeed, one aspect of globalization was the expansion and deepening of not necessarily benign internationalization in higher education in Africa. I'll be coming back to this later in the course of the lecture. But perhaps more than anything else, the era of globalization and neoliberalization constituted the forerunner of a more significant change in our contemporary history of capitalist development. That era allowed and enhanced not only the accumulation of capital, tremendous concentration of wealth led into tremendous investment in science and technology. A lot of the money that was poured into Silicon Valley, the kind of money that Jeff Bezos and co are now pouring into non-governmental space travel development. That kind of money and the concomitant investment in science, technology, and innovation, but also it limited regulation that characterized finance and what is known now as financialization, information communications technologies, and the new sciences. That era expanded and deepened structural inequality while intensifying through technologies, communications, and more rapid transportation, the contiguity and proximity of cultures and people. A very important point, that era also led to a fetishization of the sciences, technology, and mathematics disciplines, in spite of their real achievements. We cannot say STEM has not achieved. STEM has transformed the world. STEM has radically transformed the world and achieved a lot. But it led to a fetishization, a denigration, an increasing neglect, and public misunderstanding of other disciplines, such as the social sciences and the humanities. This has led to leading politicians and public figures characterizing disciplines such as the social sciences and the humanities as useless disciplines. I have had two leading politicians call the humanities and social sciences useless disciplines. One, an ex-head of state and president in Nigeria, you know whom, and the other one in Kenya, and I've had this in Ghana. I'm also hearing this kind of narrative in Rwanda. Some leaders in places like Kenya, Nigeria, Rwanda, and Ghana, focused on so-called development, have publicly criticized the non-STEM disciplines as being responsible for the misalignment between university education and workplace readiness of graduates. I argue in this lecture that the new world knowledge economy and society that characterize the emerging fourth industrial revolution, popularly known as 4IR, is not about these simplistic and prejudiced notions of the nature and role of disciplines, but also that the complexity, the novelty and capacity of 4IR to disrupt production, which is what the Vice Chancellor mentioned, disrupt markets, states, polities, cultures, and societies, demand a more complex, nuanced, and integrative approach to knowledge. I also want to emphasize that more than a siloed and static approach to knowledge and transformation, the new knowledge-driven worlds that we are on the brink of entering demand engaging, dynamic, and creative approaches to policy and policymaking that are inclusive of knowledges and epistemologies, and that cross and overcome barriers and boundaries of nations, gender, creeds, and color. On the social sciences, which are our key subject of interest, we need to recognize that there are many ways to think about the social sciences and their relationship with societies, political economy, and public policy. We can think about the social sciences in terms of knowledge production, reproduction, and dissemination, particularly in terms of the systematic and rigorous application of the methods and protocols of research to generate, analyze, and interpret evidence and knowledge, and how these are applied to understand, influence, and illuminate actually existing lives and the world. On the other hand, we can also think of the disciplines in terms of relevance and utility. In this sense, we're talking about the alignment and usefulness of knowledge and evidence to problems and issues that demand the attention of policy intervention. In both cases, the social sciences have a long history in Africa in general and Nigeria in particular.
But we must remember that the social sciences in our context have specific histories and are the bearers of different interests and agendas over the years. The social sciences, like all knowledges, come with their own political and cultural baggage. Of course, we have always known this theoretically. Nobody should be telling the social sciences that they have their cultural baggage. Max Weber, as far back as 1946, in his Essays on Sociology, talked about ethnocentricity. Again, the whole debate about values in social sciences and the objectivity of the social sciences have transcended over 5 decades. So we know that. On public policy stuff, we need to know also that the arena of public policy is complex, messy, tainted, contested, multi-directional, and in many ways ambivalent and full of unintended outcomes and consequences. Just as there's no simple compass or map, there's no appropriate technology either, not even its own GPS, to provide a useful and straightforward direction in navigating the terrain of public policy and the paths from knowledge and evidence to policy. In recent years, we have tried and passed them, both through our work in our professional development training and our training of the MRPP and our work in the research uptake with Afiti Sarah to show the extent to which the complexity of policy, its reality, its messiness, its at times ambivalence have actually affected the way we should do policy uptake. In Utafiti Sarah, which is a dedicated and well thought out scheme that supports, builds and enhances a community of researchers and policy actors, working together to ensure that appropriate and negotiated policy actions and uptake occur, either through programs, legislations, high-quality policy debates, policy designs, or administrative and other forms of civic actions around issues for which there is either research evidence or rigorous synthesis of available knowledge. This approach is based on the understanding of the complex nature of the policy process, the fact that it is embedded in politics and often located in unique and specific institutional culture. At this point, I want to examine very quickly the notion of the fourth industrial revolution, because you need to recognize the nature of the complexity. The Vice Chancellor mentioned this in his opening address. Yesterday, Professor Payo and Professor Kemba, when they were talking about knowledge, were actually referring to the emergence of this new complex system that we're talking about. There's no single definition of what constitutes the fourth industrial revolution. Because, and this is very interesting for us as people, as scientists, as scholars, we are at a particular moment in which a dynamic process and phenomenon is occurring, and we are witnesses, actors, and students of that. This is tremendous action research for us. There's nowhere in history that we have had this opportunity of a major transition occurring with an array and battery of social scientists or scholars with knowledge engaging the process itself. So it is an ongoing process and an emerging phenomenon whose form and shape are not fully yet set. Scholars and groups have attempted to capture its essential character from their different perspectives. Of course, the leading protagonist and perhaps the recognized name giver, the man who gave the name to it, is Dr. Klaus Schwab, the Executive Director of the World Economic Forum. And that's also an interesting thing in terms of what we're talking about, knowledge systems and knowledge structures. The countervailing knowledge processes and structures that is occurring in relation to the universities today. Dr. Schwab described the fourth industrial revolution as the confluence of technological breakthroughs covering wide-ranging fields such as artificial intelligence, robotics, Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, including self-driving cars and the drones, nanotechnology, the technology of very small micro things, biotechnology, energy storage, and quantum computing. As Mr. Vice Chancellor noted, already in Africa, we have various forms of this. One of the largest quantum computing laboratories is actually being developed in Nairobi now by IBM. And I think actually a set of Kenyan universities and Rwanda universities are going to be anchoring themselves to the work of quantum computing. Although the phenomenon has yet to receive the depth and degree of understanding, and that's the difference between the knowledge systems. Because if you talk about the fourth industrial revolution from a university, from a faculty of social sciences, of philosophy, or anything, there would have been theory, there would have been tremendous theorization, social or political theory. But what we have now, because it's coming from the kind of knowledge generating sector, the World Economic Forum, there's been insufficient theorization of the process. We know, though, that it has not received the same kind of attention that certain elements or economies have received. But there's emerging convergence of position among scholars and groups engaging it of its key features. The first feature, which the Vice Chancellor mentioned, is that it is transformative and disruptive scientific and technological innovations. The second feature is transnational and transboundary in character. The third feature is that it is proceeding with unprecedented rapidity of scientific and technological discoveries. Almost every moment, there's a new discovery that supersedes the previous one. And the fourth feature is the convergence, application, and the integration of breakthroughs across disciplines such as physics, mathematics, chemistry, biology, engineering, space sciences, data sciences, human behavior, ethics, politics, sociology, and psychology. All of which, and that is the importance of this conversation here today, all of which are giving rise to interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and cross-disciplinary integration of knowledges. So what a better platform to talk about this, because in itself, it is even going beyond the conversation and dialogue between disciplines. It is about integration of disciplines. From the perspective of a social scientist, the intensity, the rapidity, and disruptive transnational nature of the phenomenon come with a lot of uncertainty in all spheres of social, economic, cultural, and material life, and are posing serious challenges of understanding and action for state institutions, citizens, and entire political and civil liberty systems. And I want to give a joke that we now make in Nairobi. The joke is that all of us are becoming significantly indebted to China. One day, China will take over our countries. They will take over Apapa Wharf, Mombasa Port, and all these places. And they will not leave a single human soldier to defend it. It will be manned by robotic armies and field forces, so that none of us might even be able to approach some of those places. That is the level of the kind of technology that is emerging with this new 4IR. The level of 5G's, four-dimensional developments, and the capacity of nations. And China is already beginning to do some very interesting things, particularly in terms of surveillance and artificial intelligence. Our whole province, the province that is populated by predominantly Muslim Chinese, is actually completely under total surveillance now from the perspective of artificial intelligence mechanisms. So it has implications for human rights. It has implications for civil liberty. It has implications for governance. It has implications for technology, for how we live, what we eat. and what we even dream our leisure and the totality of our lives. And yet, in the typical Durkheimian sense, that is Emil Durkheim, the social theorist, because the dynamics are creating transition in which the old order has not given rise to the new order, there is the experience of the classic condition of anomy or state of normlessness. Another key element of the understanding of 4IR from the perspective of social scientists is the tendency
towards technological determinism and the need to challenge a one-factor technological causation approach in the determination of social change. The 4IR is being driven by a confluence of scientific and technological innovations, but no technology is neutral, no technology is innocent. Technologies are embedded in specific societies and political economies and cultural systems, and they possess dynamics that political and policy contexts and human agencies actively enable. Given these points, there is no denying the relevance and importance of the social science disciplines in both engaging the fourth industrial revolution and in ensuring that public policies necessary for its readiness. Just as technology is neither innocent nor neutral, let us also remember that public policy is neither neutral nor objective in itself. In fact, policy or the making of policy is not and has never been innocent or neutral act, resulting mainly from a balanced, objective analysis of reality, the recognition of the needs of ordinary people, or a commitment to these needs, or sheer altruism. Policy emerges from contestation. Policy emerges from the engagement of vested interests. Policies emerge from the mobilization of vested interests, particularly policies about setting agendas, agenda-setting policies that determine the direction of societies, the direction of political systems, the direction of political economies. So let us never imagine, and that's another thing that the social scientist brings to it, policies are neither neutral, nor innocent, nor objective. They serve ends, and they only address your needs as a result of political contestation and political mobilization. I've spent some time on the contested nature of policy because, as we shall see later on, this is an important recognition we need to make as scholars as we make our choices about policy research and uptake in the fourth industrial revolution. The consideration of relevant and appropriate public policies must be conscious and attentive to our structural conditions of poverty, inequality, social exclusion, repression, and exploitation. The social sciences, while not innately objective or neutral, provide us perhaps more than any other cluster of disciplines with intellectual tools to interrogate and engage these elements of the human condition. And this is something that Max Weber talked about when he talked about the demystification of the universe. The social sciences demystify mythologies. They demystify the universe. They show us that the emperor is wearing no clothes. And that is okay. You can take your political position. Your political position is a political choice based on vested interests, based on ideology. But the science, because of its rigor and its approach, allows you to see the facts in their stark reality. In fact, again, it was Max Weber in Science as a Vocation who said, when we proceed from pure positivism, we arrive at theism. When we proceed from pure experience, we arrive at polytheism. And polytheism means the existence of many gods, the existence of many values. Good social science will show you that there are many values. Good social science will show you that there are many gods. It will show you options. The choice of an option is a political decision. It is based on history, it is based on vested interests, it is based on culture, it is based on the nature of the development of the society and the configuration of social forces at that particular time in the history of that society. Another important point about the social sciences and public policy is that the social sciences distinguish themselves from other non-physical and natural sciences through their application of the various conceptions of the scientific method to their study. These range from the experimental sciences in psychology, the quantification of the disciplines in economics, in demography, in statistics, in sociology, geography, political and administrative sciences. In fact, the social sciences in the field where they focus on policy analysis have appropriated the status of the policy sciences. Connected to this transformation of the fourth industrial revolution, the recent changes in technologies and their application to the study and engagement with our human condition, the methods and ways of doing the social sciences have changed. They've been affected by digital and other technologies and the emergence of big data, leading to significant changes in their scales of coverage, replicability, and the speed and complexity of analysis. Again, talking about big data, and that's where as social scientists, as academics, we need to engage and push our governments. The greatest platforms, the greatest amount of ownership of big data in Africa today is not in public hands. It's in the hands of the utility companies. It's in the hands of the telecommunications companies. It's in the hands of the banks. And in the days of the good old Nakumat in East Africa, at times in the hands of supermarket. Because when you use your credit card, when you use your telephone, you pay through your POS or your telecommunications enhanced payment, your location is made sure, your eating habits, your spending habits, your calls, all of these are recorded and they are aggregated. Again, this is another key element with regards to civil liberties and human rights. But the social sciences, in spite of these big challenges and the emergence of the revolutions, we remain a meaning-making and meaning-seeking inquiries about our human conditions and experiences and its multiple expressions. Different from the sciences, we make meaning. All those big data, the analysis, the GPS, the geographical information systems, and all of that is about making meaning, making sense of our realities. That is the essence of our cluster of disciplines. We are a meaning-making, sense-making discipline. And it is important to also note that at significant moments of changes as we are entering in social and economic development, periods of tumult, instability, and transition, the social sciences become indispensable platforms of inquiry, not only with regards to causality, trends, directions, and projections, but also as sources of demystification of our universe in the Weberian sense and instruments for our meaning-seeking, meaning-making, and sense-making. And policies, after all, also rely on how we make sense and meaning of our realities and seek direction for government actions. I want to talk about a little bit about the social sciences and the Nigerian situation. Talking about the relevance of the social sciences, I want to argue that in Nigeria, the story of knowledge and policy making has not always been one of intentional and systematic neglect. During the nationalist era and in the first 15 years of independence, social scientists played an active role in the generation of the first 3 national development plans. Working with the Ministry of Planning and national think tanks like the Nigerian Institute for Social and Economic Research, NISA, social scientists like Professor Aboyade, Adebayo Adedeji, HMA Onitiri, Pius Okigbo, and others led the visioning, the crafting, and the process of development planning. There were also social scientists who led the formulation of policy actions in diplomacy and international relations. These included people like Bolaji Akinyemi, Osita Eze, and Ibrahim Gambari. In rural development and agriculture, Dupe Olatubosun, Akin Mabogunje, and Jerry Ghana. Other Nigerian scholars like Professor Muyiwa Awe were involved in science policy. And people like Professor Payo Bayan and Babs Fafungwa contributed to education policy, while academics such as Professors Oliko Yerasom Kuti and Olumide Lucas contributed to health policy. There was a country, there was a time when knowledge was important. And under military rule, in fact, Yusuf Bangura did a famous study in 1994 when he showed the number of social scientists that Ibrahim Babangida used to justify his wizardry with the transition program. And social scientists have been involved in policy making generally. Even as of today, as we talk about it, in economic management, the economic ministries, social scientists continue to play a role. I have raised the question of relevance and organic linkages to politics and social movement here because it is not all about the procurement and provision of the correct evidence for policy. It is also about understanding, navigating, and engaging the complex ecosystem of policy making and the politics of policy. There is the need to recognize not only the world of politics and policy, but also its context and openness to knowledge-producing sites and knowledge systems which are in themselves plural, complicated, and changing. In this context and the nature of evidence to policy has produced both a new industry and world of policy engagement and research uptake today. It is a world inhabited by many research networks in health, agriculture, and the social sciences, and it is populated by the increasingly growing numbers of think tanks, networks, and business-driven research enterprises. In fact, we're beginning to see that in PASGR. The research business is actually emerging. You find it with the five big accounting firms, but you'll find it with organizations like ITAD and the rest of them. And another interesting fact, the biggest investor in research in Anglophone Africa is the DFID. And I remember about 2 years ago when I was having a conversation with Professor Jegede of the Department of Sociology of this university, that the largest number of researchers in Nigeria who do the study of Nigeria today actually come from research business and research think tanks and tend to be expatriate researchers. So you can see the way the knowledge system is diversifying. The ecosystem of knowledge production brings us to the important issue of knowledge systems as central to the creation and advancement of the new knowledge economies and societies that are part of the fourth industrial revolution. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, our universities are no longer completely alone as generators of knowledge. According to the OECD, in 2016, there's a new notion of the knowledge triangle made up of research, education, and innovation. And recently, a group of scholars led by Pellini and Co. posited the idea of a knowledge system made up of a pentagon of features that include research, higher education, innovation, local knowledge, and professional knowledge. Professor Pam, you'll be glad to hear that the idea of local knowledge, the old idea of indigenous knowledge, is actually now seen as an embodiment of knowledge systems. And we all know that knowledge systems consist of elements, interconnections, and purpose that drive and produce and reproduce knowledge and innovation for transformation within an economy. Pellini and co. argue that the nature, type, and quality of the interactions between research, innovation, and education are important determinants of the overall performance of innovation system. One can then deduce that high-level performance of knowledge systems determine the rate of transition to and smooth functioning of the fourth industrial revolution. The role, place, and effectiveness of higher education in fourth industrial revolution does become very important for countries like Nigeria. And one of the big problems there is that we have innovation, we have indigenous knowledge, we have professional knowledge, we have research, and we have higher education. Higher education is the source of the production and reproduction of the personnel, the human capital, the expertise that engages and does this whole process. So the guys who go to McKinsey, they were produced in the universities. Maybe the guys who go to traditional indigenous knowledge, the Babalawos, but some of them are also coming to the universities too, And the professional knowledge, the accountants, and a lot of them are also produced from the universities. But the problem that we see is the lack of alignment, the engagement between the sites of innovation and the site of research and higher education. And the Vice Chancellor mentioned, in fact, the amount of the generation of research that is coming out of African universities. I'll talk about that later as I deal with that section. I believe, but one of the other things that I've been talking about is the fact that scholarship has also changed today. And the role and settings of the traditional academic are being challenged by new and emerging roles, locations, and practices driven by innovations, indeed revolutions in technologies, the media, and markets. These carry with them extensive functional differentiation and integration of publics, scale and types of demand, influence, and power. I want to talk about media pundits, for instance. If you look at the pundits of CNN, we in the universities, we want to write books. You want to write a book, you spend the next 4 years. You are researching, you are writing. If you get a $30,000 grant, you are happy. But Farid Zakari sits down, has $100,000 to $300,000, 6 doctoral research assistants and postdoc research assistants, and produces a book in 3 months or 4 months, although he was accused of plagiarism about 3 or 4 years ago. And he said, well, what happened was that his research assistants brought the material and he forgot to really, in putting them together, he lost the source. We are having the same issue at PASGR. Over the past 24 months, we have been working on new forms of social and political action. Hashtag Bring Back Our Girls movement. We have concluded the research. We have just set into motion the process of publishing a working paper with the Institute of Development Studies. I heard the other day that somebody from CNN retired and said she wants to write a book on Bring Back Our Girls. I wouldn't mention her name. She's one of our West African sisters in Atlanta. And I think she's going to finish the book before Ayo, Ojebode, myself, and the rest of us finish our own book on Bring Back Our Girls. because she has the strategic leisure, she has the resources, and she has the research capacity. So the point I'm making is actually the fact that knowledge is not only produced in our sites today. Knowledge is produced across the board. But not all knowledge that is produced across the board by the new experts, by the pundits, constitute what I will call scholarly knowledge. The whole idea of scholarship is still located traditional in the conventional research institutes and in the universities. Indeed, in our emerging knowledge economies, the pursuit of knowledge is becoming generalized and commoditized functions and roles across many sectors. But all these practitioners are not necessarily scholars, in spite of their carrying out knowledge production roles and functions. Many African public universities and research organizations, including and particularly the University of Ibadan, were founded and conceived as mission-driven public good-serving entities that in those days carried the goal of national development and transformation for these countries. And I've had our pedal lecturers, our pedal instructors, they kept asking, what is the mission of your university? What is the vision, as I sat in the different classes today? But as pointed out, the terrains, institutions, and systemic nature of knowledge production is rapidly changing that and rapidly changing the knowledge. Knowledge is moving from a mission-driven production of knowledge to a business-driven production of knowledge. The fourth industrial revolution will further transform this terrain, even in the less economically advanced countries of the global south like Nigeria. Professor Laika wasn't sure whether we were developing or not. I would say we are less economically developed. A key trend will be the access to resources, global connections and opportunities, which is where we're talking about global universities. Already the private sector is a major source of resources, while the fiscal crisis of the state squeezes public institutions, who must work more in the marketplace of ideas, connections, networks, and funding. This means, and rightfully so, that there will be greater mobility and interaction between the terrains of higher education and innovation as located in business and other incubators, local and professional knowledges and research. Indeed, the knowledge of research to be valid will have to include the products and knowledges of innovation, local and professional knowledges. Institutionally, the social sciences will be at the forefront of this dynamic, along with the natural and physical sciences and technology. The challenge for our universities will be the adoption of new institutional cultures that will allow and enhance these connections and intersections between disciplines and institutional operational units. And it is not only here. Universities, according to Ken Prewitt, actually emerge from the old cathedral kind of function. When we told people that we have 13 universities coming together to collaborate to produce the collaborative Masters of Research in Public Policy, my friends from the University of Sussex and from King's College London were looking at us with their mouths wide open, because they say, even in sociology, the sociology of knowledge is not speaking to industrial sociology, not to talk of sociology speaking to social psychology. The kind of engagement that we have had on this continent, and we've been making some progress. The collaborative programs we've had in the African Economic Research Consortium work in economics, the collaborative programs that we've had in RU Forum, and the collaborative programs that we've had in PASGR with the MRPP are showing that on this continent there's a lot they can learn from us. A space, and it is out of necessity and need. It is demand-driven. No university, except the big old ones, have enough supervisory capacity or personnel for some of the courses. No universities can provide not only supervision, in some cases we need other universities even for external and internal examiners. In Africa, we are learning to collaborate across institutions on the basis of discipline. We need to learn to collaborate across disciplines, across institutions, and between institutions. One of the recent work that PASGR is doing, I'm not doing a political party broadcast for PASGR, but I keep referring to the experience of PASGR, was the new leadership, academic leadership module courses that were developed and led by people like Professor Paul Effa, in which PASGR trained, because for the Vice Chancellor it was not a training. For the Vice Chancellor, it was a moment of strategic reflection on complex systems and partnerships. One of the things that we discovered in that work was that it was necessary to begin to initiate and stimulate the recognition that our universities are not only complex systems, that our university will need to engage in complex partnerships. And at times, charity begins from home, even between disciplines and faculty. The fourth industrial revolution is going to demand that tremendously. How somebody in physics will work with an ethnographer in anthropology, will work with somebody in theology around ethics, will work with somebody in biology around the issues of cloning. All of these are the things we'll be facing in the next couple of years. We are already seeing the seeds of these changes embodied in the forces unleashed by globalization. And the pace and the volume of the innovations are astounding and are transforming work and leisure, learning, teaching, research, books, and classrooms. I never knew how to use e-books very well and iBooks. I thought I couldn't underline them because I underline books. But my daughter showed me how to actually mark e-books. So there's nothing in the hard copy books that you don't have in the e-books. As students come with multiple exposures to new media and technologies, teachers and new PhDs are being taught new ways of multimedia presentation and learning. Today's classrooms, libraries, learning and information resources are being transformed in structures, design, practices, and norms for the learners, the scholars, the practitioners, and citizens of our fourth industrial revolution societies. But we must not overtly romanticize the fourth industrial revolution world. We must remember that it is a world that is socially constructed, socially determined, and embedded with all the flaws, the inequalities, the injustices, and exploitation structured into its own very being. It is a world emerging from the neoliberal capitalist market societies and all the algorithms of oppression. That's the title of the book by Noble, 2018, when she looked at algorithms and racism. The algorithms of oppression, the algorithms of discontent, the algorithms of exploitation and injustice remain programmed into this new world. African universities, as predominantly public and mission-driven institutions, must be carriers of the drive and impulse to social justice, human rights, social inclusion, poverty elimination, ethics, peace, and good governance in the relentless warp of markets and technological dynamics that the fourth industrial economy and society will propel. Social scientists cannot claim a cynically objective and neutralist role in relation to processes, tools, and systems that themselves lack intrinsic objectivity and neutrality. The management and governance of many of our African universities will also need changing, with new emphasis on viable and inclusive governance, innovative human resources and talent management, advancement and resource mobilization and research management. Although this is a slow and painful process, as we have massive capacity deficits around the continent in governance, administration, and management. Institutional and program monitoring and evaluation, along with traditional accountability mechanisms, also need to be in place. While important equity issues, such as gender and inclusivity of minority groups and justice policies are being enacted, but there's still a long way to go. Our universities, some of them are still in the recovery and rehabilitation mode, and only a few of them have moved further ahead of the others. All of the efforts at revitalization have reclaimed some of the basic outlines of universities, but they have not confined our systemic flaws, our design problems, our governance issues, and the overall structure of the production and reproduction of high quality in the African context. Now that African universities have entered a phase of recovery and transformation, it is time to bring back vision, mission, and values. The social sciences, building on their traditions of inquiry and commitment to these issues, are best positioned to engage them. The question is, are the values of conventional scholarship in conflict with the changing demands of our emerging knowledge systems in the era of the fourth industrial revolution? If so, what do we do? But as scholars and academics, we inhabit a changing world of the emerging fourth industrial revolution, a world in which our old protracted maladies of poverty, deprivation, inequality, and exclusion have not disappeared, but where also all the shiny crowns of transformative science and technologies abound. And it's interesting, Nigeria is actually a complex reality of that. If you look at the global poverty clock, more people are entering poverty every hour, and that was shown to us by Bitenge in demo. It was constructed by the World Bank. If you Google global poverty clock, Nigeria is actually one of the most stressed countries in there. Nigeria has quite a few what you might call elements that will not distinguish it as positive. And yet it is within the same country that you have the accumulation of resources that provides for you the wealthiest billionaires on the continent, the biggest oil refinery on the continent, some of the that's what is happening in India, in China, across the world. But we need to make sure that the positive advantages and benefits of this transformation are to the best advantage of our people. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, I know that we are in the Ramadan period and that this lecture is possibly the obstacle between some of our colleagues and the need to break their fast. So I will not go too far. I go along on a lot of the key issues that I have raised. The lecture is ready, it's complete, it's written, and it will be, the provost of this college will distribute some of the illustrations and examples we have there. But in conclusion, I want to point out that three sets of issues have driven the arguments here. The first is the continuing relevance of the social sciences for concretely lived and actually existing individual and collective lives and public policy in an era of the fourth industrial revolution. I deliberately focused on the social sciences because in the past 2 to 3 months, I was going to come and talk about higher education, but the social sciences have been under high-profile attacks by presidents, deputy presidents, prime ministers, and various people across the continent. And I thought we need to engage them in the debate. The inevitable, and let them know that there's no useless discipline, and that the fourth industrial revolution is actually going to create a very interesting condition. Those of you who are familiar with the history of ideas, and the sociology of knowledge, you will remember that the first industrial revolution led to the differentiation and the separation of the disciplines. That political economy emerged from theology and philosophy, and economics, sociology, political science, psychology, and the rest of them emerged from political economy and philosophy. I want to hypothesize that the fourth industrial revolution is actually going to return us to the unity of the sciences and the unity of the disciplines. That because of the nature of the complexity of the phenomenon we are looking at, because of the nature of the interaction between disciplines and knowledges, the fourth industrial revolution will bring back onto the same platform what used to be separated as independent and unrelated discipline. The inevitability of the emergence and progression of the fourth industrial revolution is becoming evident. In our daily lives, with mobile telephony, digitalized vehicles and transportation, household appliances, leisure equipment, health and medication dispensers, the 4IR through artificial intelligence and machine learning is gradually creeping in on us without our realization. A lot of us now are comfortable when we go for surgery. You know, a lot of those surgeries that required cutting people up is no longer done that way anymore. With laser technology, with new kinds of cameras and things, you know, you have colonoscopy, you have all kinds of operations that are being performed no longer with the surgical knife. So these things are creeping in on us without our realization. In larger macro systems, in telecommunications, aviation, travel and transportation, the management of public utilities and services, shopping, manufacturing, commerce and marketing, health screening and civil registration, national defense, citizen safety and public security, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and a wide range of robotics are already being integrated. The Kenyans are talking about Huduma registration, civil registration, that will integrate all your characteristics along with your biometrics. We are beginning to see that everywhere. In fact, according to Glessing, in her book, Higher Education and the Fourth Industrial Revolution, 2018, nearly everyone will work with artificial intelligence. What you majored in will not determine your career. And Professor Obaya said that yesterday. Professor Kemba said that yesterday. What you majored in will not determine your career. The content and a deep understanding of it matters, but it is also about what you are able to do with it. We are on the verge of new forms of sense-making and meaning-making, of tooling and retooling, with new templates for jobs and life skills. The social sciences are perhaps the most prepared for studying and understanding these transitions and reconfiguration for public policy, individual and collective well-being. The second set of issues that I've tried to deal with relate to the complexity of public policy, particularly in moments of intense systemic transitions. We have shown that in ordinary stable periods, public policy making is contested and determined by interest and alliances. In moments of transitions, when social values, norms, and ethics are not yet set, and unprecedented conversations and interactions have to be moderated and mediated in the public sphere, the social sciences are conventionally endowed with the capacities to pose the right questions and unravel and demystify the cloudy webs of assumptions, vested interests, mythologies, and prejudices. An active, alert, and adaptable social science community is key to providing valid evidence, understanding, and sense-making. The third set of issues is about the fourth industrial revolution itself, as a process, as a phenomenon, and as an emerging structure. The evolving dynamics of this complex and unformed realities with several contradictory elements and arrays of actors, keen on intentional design and construction of its outcomes, in itself presents immense methodological and epistemological challenges. What kind of knowledge can we claim to know as participant observers or as action and adaptive process researchers? What are the boundaries of our capacity to grasp and appropriate knowledge in such a massive, complex arena that is also subject to the intrusions of accidents and catastrophes, from climate change, outbreaks of unanticipated pandemics, human actions located in wars, violent extremism, nuclear and other industrial accidents, xenophobic and populist national, political and economic actions. But not wanting to get into the realm of science fiction, although this is an interdisciplinary discourse, what happens if our advance in science and technologies and our space adventures bring us into contact with the unprecedented encounters with alien beings and objects out there in space? I believe these are valid questions that demonstrate that our knowledges and knowledge systems will require more intense dialogues and conversations, closer intersections, and increased integration. The moment is not one for leaders and public office holders to denigrate one set of disciplines or fetishize others. Because of its vast unknown nature and potential outcomes, the fourth industrial revolution might actually lead back to a reintegration and unity of disciplines, which the first industrial revolution differentiated. Our task in countries like Nigeria will be to be able to engage, understand, develop, and demonstrate the capacity to make sense, to make meaning, and make our own individual and collective choices on our terms. The social sciences, with their engagement with actually existing human lives and public policy, constitute immense knowledge and action resources and assets. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, what can we give as a gift to the guest lecturer of today? What is commensurate with that delivery of messaging? But we just must give a token of our love in appreciation of that lucid presentation. Therefore, on behalf of the Provost College of Medicine, sorry, you can understand because my background is College of Medicine. Sorry about that. On behalf of Provost, Postgraduate College, University of Ibadan, we present to Professor Tade, Akin, Aina, the Executive Director, Partnership for African Social and Governance Research, PASGR, Nairobi, Kenya. Our own Professor Aina, the 77th Postgraduate College Interdisciplinary Research Discourse Lecturer on this day, Tuesday, 21st May 2019. We say we appreciate you.